In the weeks leading up to his inauguration, the prospect of a trade war loomed large over Canada as Donald Trump prepared to assume the presidency. For a significant period, Canadian officials and industries braced themselves for the possibility of tariffs that Trump had threatened to impose. However, in a surprising turn of events, Canada managed to sidestep these punitive measures, at least for the moment. On his first day in office, Trump reiterated his stance on trade, signaling that while Canada and Mexico had temporarily evaded tariffs, the threat was far from over. He explicitly mentioned that tariffs could be implemented as early as February 1, 2017, and instructed federal officials to conduct a comprehensive review of the United States trade relationships. This review would focus particularly on what he referred to as unfair practices, with specific attention to trade with Canada, Mexico, and China. During his campaign, Trump had made bold promises regarding trade policy, pledging significant import duties that could reshape the economic landscape not just for Canada and Mexico, but globally. He proposed imposing a staggering 25% tariff on imports from Canada and Mexico, alongside a 10% duty on goods from other countries worldwide. Furthermore, he threatened a substantial 60% tariff on imports from China. These measures were positioned as necessary steps to protect American jobs and industries, and to rectify what Trump characterized as long-standing imbalances in trade agreements that favored foreign entities over American workers. In his inaugural address, Trump made it clear that his administration would adopt a confrontational approach to trade. He proclaimed that the United States would tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. This statement underscored his administration's commitment to pursuing a more protectionist trade agenda, emphasizing a shift away from the free trade principles that had previously dominated U.S. economic policy. The implications of these proposed tariffs are vast and multifaceted. For Canada, a nation whose economy is deeply intertwined with that of the United States, the potential for tariffs on its exports raises significant concerns. Approximately 75% of Canadian exports are sent to the U.S., making the country highly vulnerable to changes in U.S. trade policy. The imposition of tariffs could lead to increased costs for Canadian businesses, reduced competitiveness in the U.S. market, and potential job losses in key industries. Canadian officials have responded cautiously to the trade threats, seeking to engage in dialogue with the new administration, while also preparing contingency plans in case of a trade fallout. The Canadian government has emphasized the importance of maintaining a strong trade relationship with the U.S., highlighting the mutual benefits of their economic partnership. Trade between the two countries supports millions of jobs and contributes significantly to both economies. Moreover, the broader North American Free Trade Agreement (NAFTA), which includes Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., remains a focal point in discussions about trade policy. Trump has repeatedly criticized NAFTA, arguing that it has led to the outsourcing of American jobs and a trade deficit with Mexico. His administration's review of trade agreements could potentially lead to renegotiation or even withdrawal from NAFTA, which would have profound implications for all three nations involved. In the context of global trade, Trump's aggressive tariff policies could set off a chain reaction, prompting retaliatory measures from other countries. Trade wars can escalate quickly, as nations respond to tariffs with their own import duties, leading to a cycle of retaliation that can disrupt global supply chains and economic stability. The potential for increased tensions in U.S.-China relations is particularly concerning, given the already complex dynamics between the two economic giants. As the situation unfolds, many stakeholders, from industry leaders to policymakers, are closely monitoring the developments. Businesses that rely on cross-border trade are particularly anxious about the uncertainty surrounding future tariffs and trade agreements. The unpredictability of the Trump administration's trade policy could lead to hesitancy in investment and expansion decisions, further complicating the economic landscape. In the lead-up to Donald Trump's inauguration, Canada found itself in a precarious position, bracing for the potential fallout from a trade war with the United States. For weeks, the Canadian government and businesses prepared for the worst, anticipating the imposition of tariffs that could significantly disrupt trade relations and impact the economy. However, as Trump officially took office, Canada managed to evade immediate tariffs, at least for the time being. On January 20, 2017, Trump was sworn in as the 45th President of the United States, and his administration wasted no time in signaling its intentions regarding trade policy. During his inaugural address, Trump made it clear that his administration would adopt a protectionist stance, emphasizing the need to tariff and tax foreign countries to enrich our citizens. This declaration set the stage for a series of actions that would redefine U.S. trade relationships, particularly with its nearest neighbors, Canada and Mexico. The looming threat of tariffs had already created an atmosphere of uncertainty. Trump's administration had signaled its intent to impose steep import duties, a staggering 25% on goods imported from Canada and Mexico, 10% on other global imports, and a jaw-dropping 60% on products from China. Such measures aim to protect American industries and jobs from what Trump characterized as unfair trade practices. However, they also raised concerns about retaliatory measures, potential job losses in the U.S., and the overall health of the North American economy. As Trump took office, he ordered federal officials to conduct a thorough review of U.S. trade relationships, specifically targeting perceived unfair practices. This review would include a close examination of trade agreements with Canada, Mexico, and China, countries that had been repeatedly criticized by Trump during his campaign for benefiting at the expense of American workers. The prospect of a trade war raised alarms among Canadian officials and business leaders. Canada and the United States share one of the largest trading relationships in the world, with billions of dollars in goods and services exchanged daily. Tariffs could lead to higher prices for consumers, disrupt supply chains, and ultimately harm the economies of both countries. The Canadian government, under Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, expressed its commitment to defending Canadian interests while seeking to maintain a constructive dialogue with the new U.S. administration. In the context of this evolving trade landscape, it's essential to understand the broader implications of Trump's trade policy. The push for protectionism reflects a significant shift in U.S. economic strategy, moving away from the free trade agreements that have characterized U.S. policy for decades. Trump's America First approach prioritizes domestic industries, aiming to revitalize manufacturing and create jobs for American workers. However, many economists caution that such a strategy could backfire, leading to increased costs for consumers and strained international relationships. Moreover, the potential for a trade war raises questions about the future of the North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, a cornerstone of economic cooperation between the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. Trump has long criticized NAFTA, claiming it has led to job losses in the U.S. and unfair trade practices. His administration's willingness to renegotiate or withdraw from the agreement could have profound implications for the economies of all three countries. Canada, in particular, has been actively engaging in diplomatic efforts to safeguard its economic interests. Canadian officials have emphasized the importance of maintaining open trade borders and fostering collaboration with the U.S. In response to the uncertainty surrounding Trump's trade policies, Canada has also sought to diversify its trade relationships, exploring opportunities with other global markets to reduce dependency on the U.S. As the situation unfolds, the relationship between Canada and the U.S. will be closely scrutinized. Business leaders, economists, and policymakers on both sides of the border are acutely aware that the stakes are high. The Canadian economy relies heavily on exports, with a significant portion directed to the U.S. market. Any disruption in trade could have cascading effects, impacting jobs, investment, and overall economic growth. In summary, while Canada has temporarily evaded the tariffs that Trump threatened during his campaign, the specter of a trade war looms large. The incoming president's commitment to imposing tariffs and reviewing trade relationships signals a new era in U.S. economic policy, one that prioritizes protectionism over free trade. As both countries navigate this uncertain landscape, the future of their economic relationship hangs in the balance, with far-reaching consequences for millions of workers and businesses on both sides of the border.